ERE Recruiting Conference.
So that song is just to say that I am a last-minute stand-in for the head of talent from Amazon. So sorry I let you down if you were coming to hear that chap, but you got me instead. I usually get to speak to company owners and CEOs, and they are mind-blown when I start talking about recruiting and hiring and things like that. As you would imagine for you guys as well, they get really excited and have their minds blown. I was told to come and blow your minds. It's very intimidating when you're sitting with a bunch of peers and some generals and the godfather of talent acquisition himself, Jerry. It's intimidating to be here, but I'll give you my best mind-blowing tip, okay? And it came from Jody just then, and it was this. You could go to layoff.com and put a rumor about your biggest competitor. Then, once that link is live, send that to the people you want and just say, hey, according to this, you may want to respond right now and be the first in line. Is that good? Is that tweetable? All right, that's it. Thanks a lot. No. I do love culture, this topic of hiring to your culture. I love culture everywhere. I love people. I think the dynamic of people and the unpredictability of people is such a fascinating topic. I've traveled the world. I think I've been to about 35 different countries studying culture or vacationing. But I love this whole thing of figuring out how people work together. It's a mad puzzle we're in, isn't it, in the talent space. And you figure we're all working together, trying to figure out the way how everyone fits together. And you feel like you've just got it, and then they suddenly decide they don't want to do their job anymore, or they're a millennial and they've mastered it after 6 weeks and they need a promotion. It's just a mad puzzle, always moving, always changing, but I love it. I moved to the States about 20 years ago, and I arrived in Texas, and a lady said to me, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from England. She said, well, how long did it take you to learn English? Yeah, I know. And I was like, no, I'll humor her a little bit here. I said, well, I picked it up as I went along, maybe 20 years, I don't know. And she said, oh, you speak English in England? And I said, yeah, they do, yeah. And they speak German in Germany, French in France. It's funny. I said, do you know you speak American? And she said, really? Anyway, and I thought, wow, look at this culture, you know. Would it be fair to label you all like that and say this is the culture? It wouldn't be fair, would it? A number of years back, we had to look at and answer this question of saying, okay, we got a lot of hiring in our company. We're going to double the size of our firm in about 6 months period of time. We're a small company, so it went from 1 to 2 people. No, but it was still a small company. I'm like, okay, it's going to be really critical we answer this question, what is our culture? Because when you grow fast, the new people overtake the old people, or the people who've been there for a while, and suddenly culture's transformed, and if you don't get it right, you could find, oh my gosh, what have we just done? But it's quite a scary question to ask, how do we hire to our culture? Because I peer into some companies and I'm like, okay, it looks like they've been cloning. It looks like everyone's exactly the same. They look the same, they sound the same, they talk the same. And I don't know if that was what they intended or what. You get into that kind of hiring managers. We all work with hiring managers and they go, I'll tell you within 2 minutes if they're going to be a fit or not. And you go, what? What do you mean? You mean you're going to tell me if you like them and they like you and they made you feel good? Is that what you mean? You know, that kind of gladiator hiring, like, yep, pass, not a fit. Sorry, can you define that for me, you know? And we get into this cultural fit thing, and it's actually quite a scary thing if you don't define it. And so as we went through this big exercise, we started looking, okay, how do we define, it's funny actually with the whole thing of, I don't know if anyone's from Google here, so if I'd like to ask, just in case, because I might be making something up. But Laszlo Bock said, at least a couple of years ago, that they'd removed all hiring power from hiring managers, completely. And they went to a committee hiring. And so they hire by committee for a department without involving the hiring manager because of hiring bias, and they didn't want to have a whole bunch of people who looked and sounded the same. And so, and I don't know if it's true or if I just made it up. I may have, I'm in sales. So, but one of the things, you know, I think it's George Patton said that if everyone's thinking the same, no one's thinking at all. And one of the things when you start talking about culture, we don't really want to create an environment where everyone's thinking the same. Because then no one's thinking you're not going to progress, you're not going to grow. So for us, we had to answer this question of what is important to us in our hiring. And we brought it down to really scrapping the word cultural fit, and we said value alignment. We started talking about values, because if you can't define culture, you can't measure it, then how do you hire for it and actually come on a consensus of saying, what do we mean by culture fit? And we measure things that matter. You know, if it really matters, you've got to be able to measure it somehow in hiring. And this whole definition of fit, you've got to be able to measure it. And so we actually brought it down to that sense of, okay, we must have diversity of thought. We must have diversity of perspective, but we do not want to forego or give up value alignment. And so when you throw out, say, so what are our core values, and you throw out something like integrity. Now, we can say, well, that's black and white, but it's not, because in traveling around, I see there's lots of gray. It's black and white to me, but my black and white may be different than your black and white. So we now have to define what we mean by integrity to be able to measure it in an interview, right? Right? Okay, good. Whew. Okay, time's up. I'm out of here. No. So that was really important for us. It's not just a list of core values that are buried on your website somewhere or in your handbook that HR or the CEO created. Your company culture is really the behaviors of the organization. What actually is functioning on a day-to-day basis? How are decisions made? How do people communicate? And you might have that down to different department level and division level. In the roundtable discussions earlier, fascinating talk, just hearing about just how, through acquisitions and different cultures merging together, it's like blended families, trying to figure themselves out, figure out how they're going to function. But actually bringing definition to it into a way that you can actually articulate in words rather than just saying random. You can't just say random words and think that all different people from different cultures and backgrounds define it the same way. So if I say integrity, and we have to bring a definition that I would say is ethically unwavering, being honest, and inspiring trust. That's how we use it in our company. So then in our interview process, we actually include that in there and interview for those things. And I know it's a little bit of gray and it can get a bit muddy, but it really helps when we start avoiding this fit, no fit. We're scorecarding those values. Scorecarding those to a point where we can actually say, let's give a rating to this. Give us examples about this in your life. Imagine communication. Somebody says collaboration is really important. Well, to one person, collaboration might mean the absence of conflict, right? You think, do we really want a company where there's no conflict at all? Because I think healthy conflict is a really good thing. For our organization, communication and collaboration is really important. We actually say we love and cherish rigorous debate because we value diversity of thought, perspectives, and opinion. So if you don't like that, you're not going to fit in our organization. So we challenge people because we want people to have an opinion. What's your opinion? Don't just say yes to everything. And so we dig through that in our interview process because it's a value of our organization and we measure it and rate it. So hopefully this is helping for some of you. But I think a lot of organizations we get to work with and help them with their critical hiring. And we hear so much companies come back and say, oh, we have great culture. Okay, good. Can you define that? Yeah, it's like a family. And I'm like, well, that's probably not a very helpful term because some people's families are crazy. And some people want to escape their family to come to work. They don't want to go to work and go and be around family again. So that's not a good definition. You've got to define it in a way that you can measure it. So that's my first and major point. If you want to take one thing today, bringing a very clear definition and articulation to what you mean by culture and break it down to words that you can, to the point. You've got to wrestle this. Like we just heard from Dawn about getting in a room and wrestling things through until you find out what are we actually saying here? What do we really mean when we say that word? And let's come to an agreement on this word. I mean, by case in point, to say, I don't know if anyone's from Orlando here, but I come here and I go, wow, it's flipping hot. And somebody who lives here is like, no, it's not. This is beautiful right now. I don't know if it is beautiful right now. It's disgusting to me. I'm sweaty, I sweat when I walk up the stairs, but it's a different issue. But We can say, well, it's really hot outside, and somebody else is not. Or I say cold. I live north of Chicago. And I say, somebody might say, oh, it's really cold, isn't it? And I'm like, no, you come to Chicago in January, and we'll talk about cold. Or if I say to you, I'll get back to you soon, what does that mean? It means something different to everybody. We polled everyone in our organization with about 50 different, no, I think it's 20 different statements. And what does it mean to you? And I said, I'll get back to you soon. For me, is about a week. Somebody else, I'll get back, they're going to be very upset and offended if I say I'll get back to you soon and it takes me more than an hour. Because soon in their mind, you understand? So you start bring some definition. If communication is really important to you, define it and say exactly what you mean by that. Otherwise, you're not going to create an environment, a cultural norm or behaviors that people go, okay, I'm accepted here, I'm a part of this. And you'll actually eliminate diversity. Because people say, they said this one thing, but it's not aligned. And this is where alignment comes in. Value alignment. If you're not aligned and you're not clarified what you mean by that, how the heck are you going to interview for it? And you've got one hiring manager who talks about creating a sense of urgency in their department, and somebody else. There are some countries where if you show up to a wedding a couple of days late, you're welcome. It's great, no problem. The wedding lasts for 5 days, doesn't matter. You don't show up on time. I would be so ticked if somebody showed up to my wedding 2 days late. Right? But it's like, you start talking about diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. You've got to establish what you mean by values, define them, and wrestle it until the point where you can measure it. And if you can't measure it, I don't know if it's a value. So once you've established those things, make it really clear, and then you can train your hiring managers. You can train your hiring managers to assess these things and actually scorecard when it comes. I know recruiting is very broad, and we think, okay, what about skill set? Well, I'm not talking about that today. I'm just talking about value alignment. But you add this into your interview process and train hiring managers to really assess for the values that are critical and important to your organization. And then you get really good feedback, and you're going to avoid this hire, no hire, fit, no fit garbage that we've got to eliminate. I would say rubbish, but I was bilingual for you. Did you see that? It's good. But yeah, we need to eliminate that stuff, the hire, no hire, gladiator, thumbs up, thumbs down, or no feedback whatsoever because they can't articulate not a good fit, meaning I like them, I don't like them. Thanks a lot.
ERE Recruiting Conference.